welcome our next guest, the First Lady of the United States of America, Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, here to join us from 1962. I'm so glad that you could join us. I've been talking with our previous guests about how nations acquire land, and of course, once you have land, you have to find various ways to defend it. And you very recently had a pretty terrifying experience having to do with the defense of land. Let me give you a little bit of background before I ask you questions. Did you know, you may not have known, I didn't know until recently, that Dr. Albert Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared, which I don't even pretend to understand, but that theory was taken by other scientists and who discovered that it could set off a chain reaction of explosions. Those chain reactions, of course, eventually becoming the nuclear weapons, which are the terror of the modern age. And I think it probably was pretty difficult for Dr. Einstein to see that happen because, as you may know, he was a pacifist. The interesting thing to me was that even though he was a pacifist, he actually approached the United States government, though, and encouraged them to start developing atomic weapons. And the reason for that was that the Nazis were developing atomic weapons. But I think when he saw those dropped on Japan, it probably broke his heart. And of course, he died before he saw the Cold War start, which you have experienced so firsthand. Tell me about when the United States discovered that the Soviets had missiles in Cuba.
We discovered them through the Air Force. They went and took images, and the first time we really couldn't see it was actually there, so they went around a second time just to make sure. And there were missiles there, very much previously.
And how close were those missiles to the continental United States?
They were only 90 miles from the tip of Florida, so if they were to be launched, many people, many citizens of America, would not be here.
They could have wiped out the entire East Coast, couldn't they?
Very much, yes.
So when your husband, the president, discovered that those missiles were there, what did he do?
Well, of course, people till today ask him why didn't he just go with war? You know, because we knew that our enemy was not going to agree to anything. He's over a communist nation. He's a dictator. So of course, the first thing that we did was we authorized a blockade. That's what John did. And in authorizing that, the reason he did that was because we didn't know if they already had the ammunition in Cuba. But we also didn't know if it was already there. So at any time, they could have launched and we would not be here today. So the second final thing that he decided to do was just to make a negotiation. And many of his advisors said we shouldn't. And sometimes I would sneak up and see what they were debating about every day, but it was very difficult because our enemy, he wants war. Right now, we're the two most powerful nations in the world, and if we go to war with them, well, he has a good chance of taking over us.
Well, and Khrushchev is not known for wanting to negotiate.
No.
So what was it that your husband offered that allowed Khrushchev to be able to take the deal and not lose face in front of his own people?
Well, John's very talented at what he does, and to be honest, I do believe that he made it look as if he was, I would say to make it look as if he was intimidating us.
As if Khrushchev was intimidating the United
Yes.
States.
Well, I'll just say let's leave it that way.
So what did we give up? They removed their weapons from Cuba.
We would give up our weapons in Turkey that were directed towards them.
Oh, and that were nearly as close, weren't they? And that allowed Khrushchev to look like he had intimidated us. That was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Well, the whole time, John wanted peace, not war, of course. But sometimes, you know, if he did not agree to the negotiation, we would be at war this time. Yes.
Well, now, the American public didn't know about those weapons for almost 2 weeks after they were discovered, but you knew almost from the outset. What was it like for you to know such a terrifying secret and not be able to talk to anyone about it?
I'm so sorry. It's just very difficult to speak on this behalf. Well, I mean, you see me as the first wife, and I'm always very supportive. I don't talk very much because I'm always willing to be supportive towards my husband. But as a wife and as a mother, I was afraid, as all of you were at that very moment. I didn't know if tomorrow was going to come, and John would come home and I would just support him, and I know he was trying to forget about the events of the day, and I never asked what was going on. But then one day I had to. I said, John, what's going to happen to us? Not our nation, not America, but what's going to happen to us as a family? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, please, please don't mention this again. And I felt like a criminal because I know I'm supposed to be supportive to him always, and that's all that I've ever wanted to be. It was very hard because throughout this time, I never really saw the children. I never saw him when he came home. I didn't know if he was going to come home and take a nap or stay for the night. The phone was always ringing. And I was always by his side, and I would take the children out of their bedrooms and we would stay with him because we didn't know if this was the last day we would see him together. And I'm sure all of you experienced the same things that I did at the very moment, which was fear that was melting within us.
It makes me wonder if Dr. Einstein were here today. Now, he never foresaw this coming from his theory, but if he were here today, is there anything that you wish you could say to him?
Well, I've learned very much from all of his theories, and I'm very honored to meet Mr. Einstein, but in all honesty, I do wish that he would never have published his theory.
I imagine there were times he wished he hadn't published it either. Well, thank God we all made it through.
Thank God, because of God's grace, we are here.
And please give your husband the profound thanks of the people of the United States because he saved our lives by that. Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy, for joining us.
Thank you all for having me today.